Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the after-lunch breakout session. So we're all very grateful for everybody who's already arrived, and we will try to keep you interested and awake to understand what day 2 after-lunch breakout sessions mean. But we also have a very, very interesting subject to talk about today. We're going to address the aspect of the Security Council of the United Nations, which has become, in recent months, a very, very hot subject in Poland and for Poland, because Poland is going to take the non-permanent seat starting January, and this animal in New York, which is the Security Council, has become an enigma how to address in a way that can be most relevant for Poland's foreign policy. And I use the term on purpose because it has become a body with, on one hand, great powers, on the other hand, with great difficulties relating to how it operates and how it can be effective to actually implement its mandate. And we are going to talk today about this with some fantastic guests, and I'll briefly introduce them. First, our very own Warsaw University's Professor Agnieszka Bieńczyk-Wisala, who has had a long distinguished career in academia, is an expert and guru on human rights, humanitarian affairs, global crisis, and certainly Polish foreign policy. So please let us give a round of applause and welcome. Our following speaker, Ambassador Mark Otten, who has had a distinguished career at the Belgian Foreign Service, and has been also ambassador to Israel, if I remember correctly, and has served as the European Union Special Envoy to the Middle Eastern peace process, to the Quartet, for several years, an extremely experienced diplomat, peacemaker, negotiator, and a person who has had wonderful experience, long-term experience working with the United Nations. Ambassador, it's a pleasure to have you with us today. The third speaker, our very good friend here at the Warsaw Security Forum, I think the third edition right now. It's a great pleasure to welcome Vuk Jeremic, the former foreign minister of Serbia, the former president of the United Nations General Assembly, and a runner-up to the seat of the Secretary General of the United Nations. So I cannot imagine a better person to tackle this subject with us. Vuk, it's a pleasure to have you with us today. And finally, Ambassador Maciej Popowski, also a very familiar face here in Warsaw, a great Polish diplomat who's made it through the EU ranks as Deputy Secretary General of the External Action Service, and now leading the very, very tough portfolio as Deputy Director General of Enlargement and Neighborhood Policies. Ambassador, it's a pleasure to have you with us. And it will be great to hear about the relations between the EU and the UN in the perspective of our subject. Thank you. Well, ladies and gentlemen, today's discussion is also very important because at the Warsaw Security Forum we're trying not only to address issues relevant for our region, but we're trying to look at the global outlook of security and show the importance of interconnectedness. Well, let us remind ourselves that the United Nations stand on the 3 pillars. That is the pillar of human rights, that is the pillar of peace and security, and that is the pillar of development. Now, the Security Council is a body which has the biggest, the only one actually sanctioned by international law to sanction the use of force in international relations. Now we have to remember that's a powerful tool and one that still isn't used enough to prevent huge amounts of great atrocities and great crises which are happening. So why is that, and how is that body functioning in today's international affairs? And perhaps, Professor Misala, if I can ask for a few remarks in this view.
Thank you very much. I will be rather pessimistic. I will start pessimistic. For last years, I did some research on the prevention of genocide, prevention of mass atrocities. I did some research in Rwanda and UN institutions, and most of my partners said that there is right now so huge level of violence in the world, so many humanitarian crises, that international institutions are not able to respond, are not able to react. And we know, referring to the Security Council, that there are more and more national, international armed conflicts with no reaction from the Security Council. Of course, there are many factors. I don't want to condemn Security Council, but unfortunately, the impression is that even when we face the genocide, human being is really not the most important for decision makers, for politicals, for Security Council. And of course, every time when mass atrocities happen, the situation is so complicated, so many factors, economic, political, security factors influence the situation, that probably international society is not able to adopt a toolbox and to be sure that everything would work perfect. So when we would analyze Security Council resolutions, it's quite visible that there are more and more resolutions. Security Council uses this word prevention, that we should prevent, because of course we, Security Council, very often is not able to react properly, or the results of these reactions, like in Libya, were not always positive. So let's prevent. But Security Council, as you know, there is the structural prevention and operational prevention. So Security Council could be useful, decisive for operational prevention, but very often it's too late. That's why probably I'm not very optimistic about the reform or discussions about the reform of Security Council. And maybe my last comment would be that in the discussion about the reform of the United Nations, very often we point the problem of the power of veto of the permanent members. But unfortunately, I don't think that permanent members would agree to change anything in this system. Of course, Western ones like UK or France announced that in the case of genocide and other mass atrocities would never veto resolution. But major changes happen only after the earthquake. And now, of course, the situation is horrible in so many parts of the world. But, like in my opinion, there are turbulences, but not the earthquake. Like, for example, the Second World War. This is why there is no chance to major changes. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Agnieszka. Mark, if I can ask you now, Agnieszka mentioned about the need for earthquakes. You've been engaged in political processes, peace processes across the Middle East. You know that how hard it is to reach any kind of settlement at the same time when it's clear for all the governments in the world that none of those crises, which are security threats currently for countries in Europe, for instance, will be resolved without a political settlement. So what is your view of the role of the Security Council in those processes and how it can be more effective?
Thank you. Let me first thank the organization for inviting me and also congratulate Poland for its assuming the seat as a non-permanent member the Security Council. Poland is a very central country when it comes to the EU, when it comes to NATO, and we're very glad to see that it's prepared to take the worldwide responsibilities. That's why I'm here in my capacity, not as a Belgian diplomat. I don't represent my country anymore. I'm retired, but as the Vice President of the European Institute for Peace, that has received a lot of support from Poland, aims at helping governments move quicker in terms of conflict prevention and mediation on the basis of the European common principles. So, second remark I would make is that I've never served in the UN bureaucracy. I've never served as a diplomat also in the Security Council. So what I see is as an external observer, and sometimes it reminds me when you see a resolution, you wonder how they came to that resolution, to that language. It reminds me a bit of what happens in the EU too, when you're not part of the discussion, you don't understand why this sentence is there or the other sentence is there. It's not part of a negotiation or compromise. Certainly that's one of the areas where certainly the UN Security Council improved in terms of clarity, transparency. How is the decision made, and what are the interests that are represented in this particular resolution? I think also that I don't believe, again as an external observer, that the reform of the Security Council will be so tremendous as to change its usual way of functioning. But knowing better how it functions would be a first, and maybe looking at other elements to improve the functioning of the Security Council and the functioning of the United Nations in general would be the avenue to go. I think also from my own experience that there is a Secretary General, like there was a Secretary General of the Council that became a High Representative. And it's very important that you have there a personality that is able to build consensus, accelerate consensus, and receive a mandate to implement. I hope that the current Secretary General will be able to manage that, and for that I would also insist that he need a staff that is dedicated to the person of the Secretary General, not depending on instructions from the member states. So I think if there is something like that, maybe the Secretary General can change some of those blocking the decision in the Security Council into action and into compromise, so that we go back to this moments, these few moments where the Security Council was an enormous moral power, because there was a unanimity in whatever decisions they made. The second thing I would say is that it's not because the Security Council could not be reformed, could not work better, that the UN doesn't work better. My experience of the UN is working on the ground with UN missions, and I can tell you that without the UN there would be a lot more conflicts and a lot more probably violent conflicts than there are now. And that is thanks to outstanding individuals like Filippo Grandi, who is my friend who worked in Gaza with, or Stefan de Mistura at the moment, although he has the most difficult dossier on Islam at the moment. And the rest is competent, professional and courageous staff that implement the mandates that they have received, and that often go beyond their mandate by creating more space for negotiations and facilitation by mediation.
Can I ask you a quick follow-up on this? About Stefan de Mistura, who is now leading the political process for Syria, how is he able to gain the right political support and maneuver in those conditions? Are there any chances for breakthroughs, and what's the role of the Council, if any, in this regard?
Well, the Council has adopted a resolution on which the Geneva talks are based, and therefore Stefan has the mandate to implement it. The situation is, well, there have been other impossible missions, but he has done wonderfully in Afghanistan and in Iraq also. So some conflicts take time. Look at their Security Council resolution on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Since the outset, the creation of the Israeli state. So one should not criticize somebody for not making progress or enough progress in 4 years, where some other conflicts has been almost a century of conflict that has not been resolved in spite of UN security resolution.
Right, so it's a long-term process that we're looking at here. Vuk, I want to turn to you. Thinking about those processes which can take a lot of time, but again, sometimes get the conditions, maybe let's call it ripeness for change through earthquakes or through events that happen. Well, how can a body like the Security Council react then? What are the inner workings of it in this situation? And also, if you can talk a little bit how a non-permanent member of the Security Council can actually really influence those events or those operations.
Well, thank you very much for this question. And as reflecting on what Agnieszka was saying, I was actually leading the Security Council, the UN negotiations on the reform of the Security Council, because I was the president of the General Assembly. And 2 days ago, I was in touch with the current president, who's a good friend of mine, Miroslav Lajčák, and I looked at the agenda of the special meeting that he chaired in the UN, and it was absolutely amazing how identical situation from 5 years ago, how it was now in 2017. So I totally agree that there's very, very little hope and prospect for moving forward with the reform of the Security Council. And there I can testify, in this regard. P5 are united as one when it comes to no change. So no change, no dilution of their privileged position. And it's not only to do with the reform, it's also to do with what you said, the non-permanent members initiatives. And there was a very good example of a major non-permanent members initiative that was just shot down by the P5. If you remember, Turkey and Brazil had an initiative to do with the Iranian nuclear program, and they brought forward an initiative to the Security Council, which was essentially something that very, very few people could criticize on content, on its merit. But it was shut down, it was vetoed. It was vetoed by permanent members of the Security Council. Because if you're a small fish, you're not supposed to lead the big things in the Security Council. And I think that's wrong. I think that a non-permanent member can actually make a significant contribution, but a member would need to be courageous in bringing issues forward. Yes, you are going to be discouraged if you do so. Yes, you are going to be discouraged if you do not follow the line. Another example, remember the resolution in Libya and the famous Germany's abstention from voting on that resolution? There was an ocean of writing in the West in particular. Is Germany leaving the Western alliance? Is it starting a foreign policy on its own? And they were just abstaining from vote on a resolution that, in the end of the day, turned out to be a really difficult and problematic thing. So, I think it is essential, if you are elected to be a non-permanent member, to leave a mark, to be very activist, because there are actual tools for making visible not only your country, but actually issues that you care about, especially during the month of the presidency of the Security Council. So Poland is going to be president of the Security Council at some point. I don't know which month.
In May.
It's going to be in May. So you can do a whole lot of things when you're president. You can call special meetings, you can call special sessions, you can invite external actors to testify in the Security Council, and they all have to sit there. Even when you're not in the presidency of the Security Council, you can do a lot of things according to the so-called Arios formula, named after famous Venezuelan diplomat who served as president representative of Venezuela back in 92 and 93. He was a very activist permanent representative. You can invite meetings, you can call meetings that are not official, and there, not everybody has to show up. Unlike when you're president. When you're president, everybody has to show up. But you can actually have permanent activism with regard to the issue that you care about. And yes, you may not force a voting of a resolution if you don't have a P5 on board, but you can do an awful lot when you're there. And I very much hope that Poland's going to prove to be a very agile and activist member of the Security Council in the next couple of years.
We do have that hope as well. And then brewing some ideas for that, Maciej, I'll turn to you on two fronts, let's say. One front, exactly picking up on Vuk's points, how Poland itself could be effective as a non-permanent member. What should it focus on? What points to push? And also, with your experience, is the platform of the EU and EU coordination within the UN and between the UN and the EU a good platform also for Poland to make its mark at the Security Council?
If you don't mind, I'll start with the second one. I'm not supposed to be very Polish here. The EU-UN cooperation, the EU is still a true believer in what we call effective multilateralism, which was well captured in the security strategy in 2003, and then once again restated in the global strategy. So we are a true believer, if not the true believer. So also UN is a partner of choice for many reasons. To a certain extent, because of EU's, let's say, comprehensive kind of engagement in foreign policy, we cooperate with all pillars of the United Nations. Today we focus on the Security Council, but we have very close relationship on human rights and humanitarian cooperation. I mean, being a major humanitarian donor, EU is still collectively the biggest donor of development assistance, and of course we have built up a certain profile as a crisis management body, so we tick all the three boxes. Now, we are also dependent on the UN. Now I'm zooming in on security and defense. The most important EU missions and operations, in particular military missions and operations, they have a UN mandate or UN-based mandate. So we need a UN resolution to continue our military operation in Bosnia and Herzegovina. We needed one for our anti-piracy operation at the Horn of Africa, and we needed one for Central African Republic, etc. So we are watching very closely what's happening in New York. We know all the downsides, but we still need UN Security Council endorsement for most of our actions. It's also a constitutional requirement for some of EU member states. Over the last 15 years, we built up a very close operational rapport with the United Nations. It goes back to a 2003 joint declaration under which a special EU-UN steering committee on crisis management was set up. It was a bit dormant for the first couple of years, so we had a slow start. But after the creation of the EAS and the entry into force of the Lisbon Treaty, it was really reinvigorated. So now it delivers well. I mean, it's not very modest for me to say because I used to co-chair it for 5 years in my previous job. But now we are talking about real operational business. I can give one example. As you may know, the EU has done a number of bridging operations for the United Nations in Africa. We did it in Chad, we did it in DRC in 2006, and the last was the short-lived EU operation in the Central African Republic, where we had to bridge the gap between an African and a UN deployment, which we did quite successfully. And that also involved a major real estate deal, because we handed over our headquarters, which we built from scratch in Bangui. You can imagine building something from scratch in Bangui. We handed it over to the United Nations, and they paid $12 million for it. So this is the level of detail. And so really, we also managed to develop a bond with the organization, with different departments, in particular the Department for Peacekeeping Operations and Department for Political Affairs, and I hope it will stay that way. Now, coming to the question about Poland's membership, I'm very happy it's going to happen. It's been almost 20 years, I think. I very much agree with both. Everybody can leave a mark. And there is, has been a string of small countries that have really left a mark. Like you mentioned Arias, I mean, that's his legacy. He was just an ambassador of a Latin American country, but the legacy is still there. I know that, and there was recently a meeting in New York where all the newly elected members, the kids on the block, spoke about their ideas. I know that Poland would like to concentrate on conflict prevention, rightly so, but also the primacy of international law. That's very good. But I think a country like Poland could be a bit more ambitious than that. I wish, also as an external observer now, not as an inactive Polish diplomat, that Poland would raise its profile in peacekeeping. Poland has a very good track record, going back to UN operations in Lebanon, for instance, or the continuous engagement, forgotten, at the demarcation zone in North Korea. And also many Polish contributions to EU-led operations in Africa and in the Balkans. I think it's a capital. Of course, that comes at a price. So if you want to be more active, you have to contribute more. But I think that's an opportunity. I would see it in terms of an opportunity rather than a burden.
Thanks very much.
Do a little bit of follow-up on this.
That's possible.
It's really important to, if you're a non-permanent member, to stick to what you've decided to do. Things that are not liked by the P5, you're immediately going to be faced with a huge program and a coordinated effort at discouraging you. I was involved a couple of months ago in advising a non-permanent member of the Security Council that is taking over in January, a newly elected member of the Security Council. And they had the idea of bringing in a debate during their presidency the role of religion and spirituality in the work of the United Nations. And there is a big division between those who believe that this is an important aspect and those who are, let's say, secularists and who do not want to have anything to do with religion in the UN. There's a sharp division there. And P5 tend to dislike the religious discussion there. When I was president of the General Assembly, I insisted that this be a debate in the UN. And of course, they came to me, they said, no, this is not a place. I personally believe that it is important because so many things that are happening in the international relations, they stem out of the religious divisions and conflicts right now. And I stood the ground. So the discussion did take place. Well, these guys, unfortunately, they haven't stood their ground. So they told me a couple of weeks ago, no, it's not going to happen. Now, I know that Poland is not a country that can be easily swayed, and I have no fear that whatever Poland decides to do, that you will see it through. But it is critical to see things through, because once you're elected in the Security Council, you have these 2 years, and you better use them the way you believe is right. You're not a permanent member, you're not going to be able to change the world, but you are going to be able to make a huge contribution to like a visibility of the problem that you believe is important.
Well, let's hope that it goes exactly as you say. But for it to go, I think for us to bring the good arguments to the table, Maciej, you mentioned prevention as the main theme. Mark, I'd like to ask you, with all of your experience, there's always a big problem with really defining what prevention, what preventive diplomacy, is, how it can be really tangible, and what we should be arguing for to strengthen it. And of course, I know that the European Institute of Peace are also strongly supportive of preventive diplomacy. If you could speak a little bit to what it entails.
Well, it's a building block of diplomacy. It's not something that you will exercise in separate ways. Preventive, diplomacy, war, etc. It's a set of tools that can be used. It's also something that is difficult to evaluate. When you've prevented something, you don't know what you've prevented necessarily. You don't know about something that hasn't happened. But I think and it can be exercised through persuasion diplomacy, it could be exercised by force when it's necessary, or the threat of the use of force. Again, it's combined with long-term planning. I think one of the things that we could certainly improve, and that's my experience, for instance, in the Middle East, if you want to prevent conflicts or to stop them in their tracks, is that we have to do a much bigger effort at understanding the social dynamics of the places where conflict happens. And since we are more and more confronted now with internal conflicts, civil wars, non-state actors, how do you get that knowledge that helps you to see something coming? And that's one thing. The second is the political will to act when you know. If you read the Arab Human Development Report by the UNDP, well, all is there to tell you there's going to be a series of revolutions in Arab countries. Everything has been not written by experts from outside, has been written by Arab, Turkish, and other experts from the region. It is there if you read it carefully since the year 2000. It is predicting what's going to happen. So what did we have? That's the other issue about prevention. The political will to act and the tools.
Political will. No, I think that's a central aspect here. It goes a little bit to what you were mentioning. Speaking of political will, I want to turn to Agnieszka here to think a little bit. How can it be, raised? And can, for instance, Poland raise political will? For instance, let's get an example of Yemen. Just today we've heard that ports are being blocked, and even the very slight amount of humanitarian assistance which is needed hugely cannot get through. Could Poland raise these sort of things in the Security Council? Would it be successful?
I think this kind of questions should be asked to politicians, not to experts. As all of you know, in Yemen especially, the situation is extremely complicated, and personally I don't believe that the United States would somehow act against Saudi Arabia, to influence strongly Saudi Arabia. So in case of Poland is a medium-sized country, and I'm not sure if right now, taking into account Poland's foreign policy, that it's able to influence political strategies, and that it is able to influence decision makers. So on the one hand, this membership in the Security Council could be a chance to build a kind of position to build the image of Poland. But in my opinion, Poland would rather choose so-called safe topics. So, as a representative of Eastern Europe, the natural topic would be, for example, the situation in Ukraine. But taking into account the relations with the Russian Federation, I don't think that Poland would be somehow engaged, and taking into account relations with Ukraine right now. So I think that Poland would choose, of course, international law, because international institutions are important for medium-sized countries, especially, much more than for powers. That's why Poland would concentrate on peacekeeping operations, which can be useful in fact, because according to all research, the presence of UN military missions contribute to less level of violence. The last example of that shows that if we limit military missions, the level of violence is bigger.
Well, maybe there's an idea. Prevention through peace operations and peacekeeping, and some proof in that, combining what you're saying and what also Maciej was suggesting as an important subject. Vuk, I wanted to turn to you also to jump out a little bit from the non-permanent member to a permanent member, or actually would say importance of permanent members' engagement on the global stage, particularly when it comes to multilateral institutions and the UN. And it seems more and more that the US is on the backtrack and that China is stepping in. Can you tell us how is this unfolding in the UN today?
There is a I would say a widespread feeling that the United States is taking more and more of a backseat in major multilateral discussions and fora, and it was very manifest. Withdrawal from the Paris Climate Treaty, withdrawal from UNESCO, announcement of severe budget cuts for the UN. In reality, it's not as bad. And a lot of things are functioning with American presence, and I know that the current permanent representative of the United States has won praises for being able to maneuver this difficult political relationship between the new administration and the idea of multilateralism. She has been apparently very successful so far, but overall there is a trend of, let's say, trimming down its presence, and there is a mirror, I would say, a mirror impression of that of China. So China is pledging more money at a time when the U.S. is pledging less. China is offering more to the system of multilateralism and offering to engage more in various fora, whereas the others are at best staying where they are. And this is one of the prevailing sentiments in the UN, especially when it comes to peacekeeping.
Do you think that Poland can use the fact that it will be in the Security Council as a non-permanent member to strengthen its relation to China?
You can do anything you want when you're a president of the Security Council. You need to fix your few priorities and then use the presidency, and this is certainly something you can do. The Chinese are yearning for I would say, I'm not going to say alliances, but understanding with others in the Security Council, in particular, for their idea of more multilateralism with Chinese characteristics, if you will. This is something that I thought I'd right away. They say like socialism with Chinese characteristics, but multilateralism with Chinese characteristics. Now, all jokes aside, it isn't normal. If you look from the outside, if you're just like an academic and look at as an analyst from the outside, you can't really blame them for that. This is the second largest economy in the world, the most populous country in the world, the country that is growing in its role and influence, and it is natural for them to do more.
Before I turn to the audience, Maciej, I'd ask you for a very quick comment, picking up on what Agnieszka said. Ukraine, the ideas being floated about the mission, and of course, we know the proposals from Russia and Ukraine currently tabled are not going to happen. But is there a chance here that this may become a format in a different changing circumstance that can allow for some progress in Ukraine? And what is the Brussels reactions to that?
We try not to have a view because this is really for the UN membership to sort out. We believe that whatever helps in taking the negotiations or bringing a settlement about is welcome. There is a whole history, as you know, behind the idea of a peacekeeping or international presence. It was a Ukrainian request back in 2014. That was the time of the interim government. The presence of the EU advisory mission in Kiev is also a byproduct of that, because we were not able nor willing to substitute for a UN presence, so we deployed a small advisory team that is still there. One of the things that certainly need to be sorted out, and this is, I think, on everybody's mind in New York, it will be the mutual relationship between a UN mission, if it ever happens, and monitoring mission of OSCE that still has an important job to do, and which we, as the EU, have been supporting from day one, also in terms of materials, providing them with cars, equipment, and whatever they needed. So, in short, if there is a consensus, and I think that the parties are still far apart, in particular when it comes to the territorial extension of the mandate, the Ukrainians expect that the mission should operate in the whole east of Ukraine. If it ever happens and there is consensus, it could certainly help in bringing about a settlement to the conflict.
Well, I'd like to get the audience to engage. I see hands up. Please be brief and introduce yourself. And there's a gentleman here on the left.
Thank you very much. My name is Kees van der. I represent the Dutch Foreign Ministry. I'd like to congratulate Poland with its non-permanent seat. We will be joining you in another non-permanent seat, my country. And the most important message from our side is that we want to cooperate and coordinate as much as possible between members of the European Union. We have always done this in the past as well. We think together we can align our agendas and fix on those important priorities. Some of those priorities were mentioned. Important is the prevention of conflicts, in particular root causes like hunger and food security and water, in particular in those areas with huge pressures also from the land, like in Africa, as we know. We also want to focus on better peacekeeping, as was also mentioned, absolutely crucial. We should improve intelligence sharing, we should improve our methods of fighting asymmetric or engaging in asymmetric warfare. Those are enormous challenges. And of course, accountability in case of war crimes and violations of international law.
I think
on all those issues, I think we can find each other, and it's more an exclamation mark than a question mark here, because I think we will work together very well. Thank you.
Right, I think the last two ones will be especially popular with Russia. Would you have a question as well, or just any more questions from the room to our panelists? I see someone in the back. Well, I have one more question that I haven't raised yet, but I will in this case. Mark, I wanted to ask you about Libya in particular and the peace process that has been going on there, because it has been a concern for the South, and the UN, well, as Wolf mentioned, had a resolution that opened up a very difficult situation in the end. And what do you see as the perspectives of cleaning up this as a UN and UN-EU collaborated political process?
Well, frankly, first of all, let's take Libya as a good example of the way the Security Council works. There is a Security Council resolution pushed by France and Britain for building areas of protection. And it becomes by intent or no intent a change of regime. So that's where Russia started to be very worried about following the lead of Western powers. So when you destroy a country, you have to know how you can rebuild it, and we don't know that. And those who did this operation actually went into it without knowing how they would rebuild it and not having a formula to do it. I would say the Americans did the same in Iraq, and therefore. Now, if you look at Libya, I think the EU has taken some measures already, a border assistance mission, if I'm not mistaken. There's the working of the several navies to stop the smuggling of refugees reason to also zoom into against the traffickers. The rest is a typical example on how another type of mediation is needed, because it's not, it's a tribal issue, it's something that has an impact on neighboring countries, and where you need to find partnerships. I think when it comes to Libya, we need a partnership with some Arab countries, not those who are fueling the conflict, but those who are ready to help. We need a partnership with the Sahel countries and the African Union, and I think it's starting to work. But again, this is a situation that has been created without any foresight about how you fix it afterwards. Add to that when you fragilize or destroy a state, you invite IS to come and establish bases, which has also been the case. So I would say, in terms when I think of that, I think of the conclusions of the report of 9/11 about what caused actually the catastrophe to happen, which was the conclusions were no imaginations, no management, and no capabilities.
Volker, so you're jumping in on it.
I wanna, jump in here at this point. Thank God I'm no longer a diplomat. I'm no longer running for office in the UN, so I can speak a little bit more freely. Libya is like the best example of a disaster, and it was first and foremost European-led effort that ended up with a disaster.
I think it started as the best example of success.
Well, now with the benefit of hindsight, I would say that there are very few people who would still call it a success. America was leading from behind, Europe, France and Britain were in the front. But right now it's a disaster. And it's a very, very nearby Europe. And it could easily have terrible spillovers on the European continent. I think it's a critical, I would say, duty of Europe, not just for the sake of humanity, but also for the sake of its own security and well-being in the future, to make a serious effort at rebuilding. Well, first of all, finishing off the conflict and rebuilding Libya, which can only be done in conjunction with the United Nations. By the way, there is a very, very good person right now leading this, Ghassan Salamé. I cannot think of a better person to do that, and I'm sure that he would be very, very happy and pleased to work closely with Europe if there is political will on the European side. And there we go again to the point of what can a non-permanent member do? If I remember well, next to Holland, there is going to be Italy in the Security Council.
No, we split up Italy and the Netherlands each 1 year.
Exactly. So
Italy is out in January.
And then Italy comes in.
And Sweden.
I remember. So take an example of Italy. It's a country that really has an interest in doing Libya right because of the geographic vicinity and all that. So if Italy, for example, picks it up as a topic and keeps pushing it, and not only use its UN diplomacy, but its EU diplomacy in conjunction, and think it through in a careful way, it can make a difference. It's not going to come on its own on the high level of priorities of the UN or the Security Council. But one country can make a difference if first of all, if it decides to be brave and open about a certain issue, and then also forge alliances, and Italy can, because of its EU membership first and foremost, to make sure that certain things are pushed forward. That would be a great example of how a non-permanent member can make a difference on an issue of larger importance.
Do I have any other questions from the room to our panelists on this matter or any other matter?
If I just can have two short comments. One on Libya, where first of all we clearly accept UN's lead. We are there to help, but it's UN in the lead. So we've always maintained a very close contact with Martin Kobler and now with Mr. Salamé. And I mean, there is a chance for a political understanding among the Libyans. But what is important also from a very practical point of view, Libya is a priority country for the management of migration because of the exposure and the number of arrivals in Southern Europe. So under the Migration Trust Fund for Africa, we have a bunch of projects with a combined budget of close to 150 million euros for the next 3 years. Our partners of choice and our only partners to do the job in Libya are UN agencies, UNHCR, UNDP, IOM, UNICEF. And we are dependent on UN's decision to return to Libya because the agencies are not there for security reasons. So the moment they give green light to return, we can start delivering real work on the ground. A very brief comment on something completely different, building on the comment by Kees van Rij. So Poland wants to, let's say, put some emphasis on the respect of international law. There is an important aspect under it, and that's the integrity of the international justice system, which is under stress. And Poland has always been a staunch supporter of international justice system, the International Court of Justice, or the International Criminal Court. Poland was one of the first countries to refuse a non-surrender agreement with the US back in 2003, when the ICC Rome Statute entered into force. And it's a bit of a negative example, but the attachment to the system of international justice is still there.
Well, I think we're running out of time. If there's no more questions, I'd like just to say that, you know, the Security Council and the UN, more broadly as its role, it seems that, you know, the failures are much more known than the successes are, and it is still a collective security body, and a lot depends how on the political will and how member states engage. But in those turbulent times, it is a very important part of the international security architecture, and as a non-permanent member, a country can influence a number of issues, and certainly should, given the political environment and situation that we are in. And we're very happy that we could have this discussion at the Warsaw Security Forum. I'd like to ask for a big round of applause for our fabulous speakers. And my personal thanks to all the speakers for your great jobs and insights. And we look forward to seeing you next year. Thank you. And thank you very much, everybody, for coming.